As promised, in my Spider-Bat Let There Be Carnage episode from a few days ago, today I am finally doing the long-awaited Teen Titans X-Men Fusions episode, continuing my series of Marvel DC Fusions, and these characters are going to be in the same world as my past ones. But I'm doing something a little bit different with the story today. As inspired by some of my recent episodes, my Spider-Bat story, my Stand User Standoff story, going all the way back to my Hero Academia Maximum Venom episodes, I've been really liking stories lately where I have one story involving all the characters going through the whole episode, instead of doing a bunch of different origin stories for the different characters. It means I can flesh out the tale a little bit more. So I've written a story with my 5 Teen Titans X-Men Mashup characters, and I'm gonna tell that as I draw the redesigned versions of these heroes. The story got a bit chaotic because there's a lot of characters involved, but I do think it's a really fun one. So give me a big old thumbs up if you're excited for a story-focused episode, because that always helps with algorithm stuff. And then we can jump into the first drawing and the beginning of the tale. Let's go! If you looked at the expression on Scott Greyson's face as he trained the night before the big mission, you likely would have read his expression as that of a bold, confident leader. But behind his crimson visor were eyes that betrayed concern and fear. Luckily for him, that visor never came off. Scott ran through his makeshift underground training facility in a blur, leaping and spinning from punching bag to combat dummy, kicking, swinging, tossing shurikens, and firing off rapid concussive blasts from his eyes. Every blow and move was precisely executed, but it didn't ease his tense mind. As he reached the end of the course, dripping with sweat, he pulled out his phone to check the weather. The following day called for torrential rains, exactly as planned. Stormbird was doing her job well, and Cylossus had been practicing to increase the speed of his hacking all week. Scott's team was ready, and regardless of whether he was or not, he had to keep acting as though he definitely was. He headed off to his room in the still under construction X Tower, ruminating on the stakes of the following day. This mission was his best chance to prove to the world and to himself that he was truly ready to lead and start saving people on his own, as his mentor had been doing for a decade now. See, Scott had spent much of his teen years fighting as a vigilante hero alongside the Dark Norseman, Bruce Blake. But now Bruce was spending most of his time fighting off large-scale, global, and universal threats with the Avenging League. Surprisingly, his home of New Gotham had another Bat-themed hero running around protecting the city, but still, with so many of the big-named heroes focusing on the huge problems of the world, nobody was answering the smaller calls, of which there were many. And this was where Scott Greyson, aka Nightclops, saw the greatest need for himself and for anyone who'd be willing to follow him. For now, his team was only made up of 3 people, but by the end of the day tomorrow, he hoped it would be much bigger.
This is it, comrade. Are you ready? Can you feel the pounding of the battle drum in your chest?
I sure can, Cy, Nightclops said, perched on a branch just above the cheery Russian cyborg, looking through binoculars at a facility 100 feet ahead. From the surrounding forest, it looked like a small, out-of-place, and unusually well-guarded warehouse, but Scott and his team knew better. Sinking down 10 stories beneath that warehouse was the Weapons Hive, a facility made to take young superhumans, enhance their abilities through whatever means necessary, and brainwash them to fight as a private army for Stryker blood. A vile man who saw superhumans as a weapon to be wielded and nothing more.
The winds rise, comrade. Our little goddess must be near. And with her drawing near, so does the battle.
Scott usually enjoyed Victor Rasputin's overly cheery attitude, but at the moment he was too focused to enjoy anything. He actively controlled his breathing, keeping his nerves at bay as the breeze went from a light churning to a ripping flurry that rocked the forest and the facility.
She is here!
And that was their cue. Nightclops leapt onto Cylossus' massive steel shoulder, and the two stomped towards the facility. As hoped, the guards were scrambling and practically blinded through the pounding rain. But of course, they suspected no foul play. Cylossus' arm clanked and shifted and reshaped into a red laser-like saw, and he sliced through the gate in a blink. Watching for guards, they both bolted for a panel on the warehouse wall. Cy's arm shifted again, and tubes spilled out from it into the panel circuits. Once more, Scott felt grateful he'd found an ally like Cylossus. Cy had been caught in a collapsing building during the first major battle between Loxy Luthor and the Super Scarlet years earlier, and the damage to his body would have been fatal if his metagene hadn't activated from the trauma. He gained the ability to shift his body into a full metal state at will, but he hadn't been fully protected, and parts of his body had still been damaged beyond repair. But his father was luckily a brilliant biomechanical engineer. He built cybernetic body parts for Cy and fused them to his body's own natural metals. Now he was not only a tank on the battlefield, but also a brilliant hacking machine and general tech genius. While he'd never show it, Cy's power made Nightclops feel like an inferior member of the team.
You are in!
The floor next to them creaked and slanted down, opening a ramp into a hallway. Out of Cy's arm sprung a small metal device like a remote.
Here is your key. It will now open any door you need, except for ones headed to the Delta Wing. But I can still open those doors with more time if you've changed your mind.
Not this time, Cy. It's too risky. But great work. Now, are you sure you're ready for this next part?
Ready? Ha! Comrade, this is what I live for!
Cy handed him the key and charged around to the front of the warehouse, in full view of the scrambling guards. His arm shifted into a crimson cannon that he fired at a truck sitting in the lot, which exploded and rocked the yard.
Come and get me, Hive scum!
Intruder! Intruder! Fire at will! Hive guards shot a flurry of useless blasts at Cy as he rampaged through the yard, swatting away foes. With that bombastic distraction along with the raging rains, not a soul noticed Stormbird soar down to meet Nightclops at their open doorway. Is all going as planned? She asked in her often somber-sounding voice. We're in, and I doubt they'll notice us with Cy making all that noise, but still, we should move fast. At this point, Nightclops was still unsure if Cy would have time to accomplish his side mission, but either way, the Russian bulldozer was doing perfect work for them. And Stormbird had also played her part perfectly, leading the storm in over a few days so it wouldn't appear out of nowhere and be suspicious. Scott wasn't actually clear on the origin of her powers, as she didn't really like to talk about her past, but he did know that she used some kind of black magic to control the weather. He speculated that her powers could go far beyond that, but he never pushed her to try. She was already incredibly powerful. The two bolted down into the facility, often stopping to let guards sprint past towards the battle above. It took them 20 minutes or so to get past all the guards to their target, with echoing impacts still heard from above. But eventually they found their way to the main containment center. Inside were 30 cells, all holding young metahumans that Stryker was using as lab rats. It made Nightclops' insides churn. 8 guards still stood watch in the vicinity. Okay, I can take the 4 on the left if you take the 4 on the right. Okay, if you say so. Nightclops opened the door and charged in, but before he even got 3 steps ahead, a streak of lightning shot from the doorway and blasted 4 of the guards. Everyone still standing stopped and looked at Stormbird in the doorway. Okay, Nightclops said, stepping out of the way. You can take all 8. She struck down the rest, and seeing her make such quick work of them, once more sparked a glint of doubt in Nightclops. Why were 2 godlike heroes taking orders from him? He was a good fighter, but it was like a mortal bossing around Titans. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a series of thunderous crashing sounds that seemed to be getting closer and closer. Is that Cy? He shouldn't be coming this way. Boom! Cy did indeed enter the room, but he was hurled through the wall, ahead of a figure even larger than himself. One all too familiar to Nightclops and his crew. Cindernaut, Scott snarled, which means that, yes, Scott. Her voice was calm and commanding. On a hovering rock into the room floated Magnaterra. Thank you for opening the door. but we'll be leaving with these recruits today. These aren't recruits, Terra, they're children. Scott sprung into action, firing an I-beam at Cindernaut that was barely noticed. The brute laughed and continued hammering Cylossus, who was still reveling in the battle. A massive foot thumped Cy's chest, and he rolled across the room to Robin's side.
Sorry, comrade, the big one is tough, even for me.
Plasma blasts started firing into the room as Hive guards entered in a swarm. Everything was falling apart around Scott.
Well, that poses a problem, but I do have some good news.
Some of the guards started to shriek and fire frantically in all directions.
I had just enough time before the Sisterhood of Metahumans arrived for my little side mission.
The guards were rapidly being mowed down by a stocky ball of claws and muscle that sliced through them all in a flurry of green and red. In seconds, the first wave of guards were in a clump on the floor. Cy laughed eagerly.
Booyah, comrade! I see why he was in his own wing.
But another swarm of guards charged in. The green brute's body suddenly shifted into that of a bear, still wielding the same long razor-like claws, and he started slashing through more foes. It was a help, but there was still a lot to be done. Cy, keep on Cindernaut. Stormbird, I know you're out of your element down here, but just keep Magnaterra distracted. I need to get these cells open fast. No matter what happens, we're getting these kids out of here. His words were confident, but his thoughts were spiraling. Luckily, his instincts were winning the fight in his mind as he ran through the room with Cy's key and opened all of the cells, telling the kids, "We're here to help, but stay in your cells until it's safe to come out." He went through cell by cell, and as he just got to the last one, Stormbird was thrown to the floor by his feet. Cylossus too was then hurled over to Cyclops. Magnaterra hovered over, floating a circle of boulders above her head. She seemed ready to make some kind of overconfident villain speech, but before she could, another being entered the room with another wave of guards. Well, well. Stryker Blood stood with his two best attack dogs by his side, Jinx Strike and Saber Mammoth. How convenient, you've all come to me. The guards all began firing a barrage of blasts as Strike and Mammoth charged in. Cyclops pulled Stormbird and Cy into a cell to hide from the blasts and regroup. His mouth hung open. He was frozen. It had all fallen apart in such a spectacular fashion, and now Cyclops even risked having the kids that he was meant to save getting hurt. He felt like he was in way over his head when suddenly a heavy slap knocked him out of his thoughts. Hey bub, what's the plan here? The Green Beast had come into the room to wake Cyclops from his stupor. You're clearly in charge here, so what are we doing? Cyclops looked around the cell and saw that all eyes were on him. Despite all three of these heroes being infinitely more powerful than himself, and despite this whole plan having gone so wrong, they were all still looking to him for guidance. Even this new teammate, Logan Garfield, despite having never even met Scott, had recognized from his quick decision-making in the battle and from his drive to save the kids that he was a leader worth following. It gave Scott a surge of confidence to still see these eyes looking to him. He took a deep breath and was ready. Cy, can you still get me to the Delta Wing? Through the chaos of powers and blaster fire, Cyclops flipped and spun to the nearest doorway. Cy had once more hacked into the system and opened every door to the Delta Wing, where a young superhuman, possibly as powerful as the toughest Avenging League members, was being held. A wildcard that Cyclops had no idea about the mental state of, but she was now their only hope. Cyclops burst into her room. 3 guards were still stationed there, but he made quick work of them with a kick, a chop, and an I-beam. He pulled out his key from Cy and pressed it in front of the containment chamber, with text marking it the Star Phoenix Stasis Unit. Fluid spilled out as the doors peeled back. The unconscious figure stayed floating in place, but as the last of the liquid pooled to the floor, her eyes shot open. She burst out of the chamber and grabbed Cyclops by the neck, lifting him off the ground with ease. Cyclops remained calm. We're here to free you, but we need your help. Back in the room, the fight raged on. Logan seemed to have a personal grudge with Jinx Strike and Saber Mammoth, and the three clawed beasts slashed gash after gash into each other. Cy and Cindernaut hammered wildly at each other, sending shockwaves across the room, and Stormbird did everything she could to stop Magnaterra from getting to the kids. Going with her would be better than staying in the weapons hive, but just barely. She wasn't exactly a great influence. But in a flash, everything stopped. Everyone was suddenly frozen in place, lightly hovering off the ground. Cyclops charged into the room, next to a glowing green and orange deity-like hero from beyond the stars. I can't hold them for long, friend Scott. Which ones are our allies? Scott had her release his team, the kids, and Logan. While she held the rest in place, Scott and his team guided the kids towards the exit. Then finally said, "We're clear, Star!" With that, Star Phoenix collapsed the exit to the room and fired out of the facility. The heroes and their rescuees fled the scene, with Stormbird concealing them in a thick fog until they were well clear of the facility and safe. Back at the partially built X Tower, any wounds were tended to and the new team reconvened. The 5 fighters gathered in one of the completed rooms of the tower.
"So, what now, comrades?"
Robin looked at them all, then at the kids they'd saved, touring themselves around the building, excitedly picking out rooms. "Now," Cyclops said confidently, "we go find some more." As said, this world was continuously filling up with more and more young metahumans, who, under the right guidance, could become great heroes. And while still in the works, the X Tower would one day be the perfect place for hundreds of young heroes to learn and hone their heroic destinies. Alright, now people gotta let me know in the comments, what do you like better in the story-focused episodes? One long continuous story with all the characters, or a bunch of individual stories for each character? Or do you even like the lore kind of episodes better, where I talk about the origin of the character a bit, and then talk about the art process a bit? I'm probably always gonna have a bit of a mix of different types of episodes on the channel, but I'm curious what people like best, so let me know in the comments. And of course, subscribe if you enjoy this kind of stuff, because I do lots of videos like this. If you want to see the other Marvel DC Mashup episodes, I've done Avengers and Justice League, their villains, a Guardians of the Galaxy Suicide Squad episode, and of course the Spider-Bat episode, which was more similar to this. And I've made a full playlist of story-focused episodes like this one, where it's one continuous story. That playlist will be in the end screen or the cards or whatever. But that's all for today. I'm Christian Pearson. This has been Popcross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and I will see you all in the video coming out Monday. Will be a pretty different one from this one, I think, but I still think it'll be fun. Alright, goodbye, everybody.